My 6-year-old took my daughter-in-law's work iPad by mistake. Her teacher called Horrified. Hooking flat. When I picked up the phone that morning in Lexington, Kentucky, I never expected to hear my granddaughter's teacher whisper the words that nearly stopped my heart. "Ma'am, do you know what was on the iPad your little girl brought to school?" I froze, clutching the receiver, as the teacher explained that my 6-year-old had accidentally taken my daughter-in-law's work iPad instead of her own tablet. The screen had unlocked in class, revealing private files, contracts, and messages so disturbing that the teacher was horrified enough to call me directly instead of the parents. What she saw didn't just hint at secrets, it hinted at a betrayal big enough to ruin my entire family. In that moment, the walls of my quiet Kentucky home seemed to close in. I could already feel the sharp sting of being erased from my own life, the estate I had worked for, the small savings I had protected after my husband passed, the home that carried my name. And suddenly, all of it was at risk of being stolen in silence. What was hidden in that iPad was not just paperwork, it was a plan. A plan so carefully written by my polished, smiling daughter-in-law that it nearly erased me from my own bloodline. And yet, even as my knees weakened, I knew this was not the end. This was only the beginning of my fight for quiet justice. Background story. My name is Lorraine. I am 72 years old, and I have lived my whole life in the rolling hills of Kentucky. I raised my children with steady hands and quiet sacrifice, working part-time in a library while caring for my sick husband until the very end. After his passing, I thought family would be my shelter. But when my son married a sharp-tongued, business-savvy woman from Atlanta, things began to change. She smiled in public, but behind closed doors I felt her eyes on my home, my will, and my legacy. I brushed it off for years, thinking perhaps I was being too cautious. But the day my 6-year-old granddaughter carried that iPad into school, the truth broke open like a dam. Secrets meant to stay hidden came spilling into my life, and I realized my quiet fears had been right all along. Chapter 1. My name is Lorraine. I am 72 years old, and I live in Lexington, Kentucky. For most of my life, I've been quiet, maybe too quiet. I took care of my husband until cancer took him, and then I raised my children with steady hands and small sacrifices no one noticed. I thought my family would be my safe place. But that safety shattered the morning the phone rang and my granddaughter's teacher spoke words that still make my knees tremble. "Mrs. Carter," she said carefully, "your granddaughter brought an iPad to school, and what opened on the screen was horrifying." I clutched the receiver, my heart pounding as I looked at my sweet 6-year-old playing with her doll in the living room. She had taken the wrong iPad that morning, my daughter-in-law's work iPad. Instead of cartoons, it had unlocked into files, documents, videos, contracts, and one message chain that made the teacher so disturbed, she didn't even call my son or his wife first. She called me. My hand shook as I whispered, "What did you see?" But the teacher only said, "Ma'am, you need to come down here immediately." That was the moment everything I thought I knew about my family began to unravel. And what I discovered on that device didn't just threaten my home, it threatened my very name. But what was written inside those files? And why was the teacher so shaken she could barely speak? If you want to hear what happened next, stay with me, because the truth is darker than you think. Chapter 2. When I got to the school, the teacher, Ms. Randall, pulled me aside into a small office. She locked the door and slid the iPad across the table. "I don't know how to say this," she whispered, "but this isn't normal workplace material." My stomach knotted as I tapped the screen. The first file that opened was a draft will, not belonging to me, but with my name on it. My house, my land, even my small retirement account, I was listed as transferred. Transferred to my daughter-in-law, Rebecca. My son's name wasn't even there. It was all hers. I gasped, covering my mouth, as Ms. Randall touched my arm gently. "There's more," she said, pointing to a chain of emails. I opened them and felt my chest tighten. Rebecca was exchanging messages with an attorney when I vaguely remembered meeting once at a dinner. The words were cold and sharp. "We need to move quickly before Lorraine's health fails," one line read. Another, "She can't handle litigation, she'll cave." They were planning to erase me from my own legacy, my son's wife, the woman who smiled across my table at Thanksgiving. I felt like the walls were closing in. My granddaughter had no idea what she carried in her tiny backpack that morning. She had carried evidence, proof of betrayal, and it was in my hands now. But what could I do with it? If I confronted Rebecca too soon, she'd bury it, twist it, make me look like the crazy old woman. I needed to think. Would anyone even believe me, or would they side with her polished charm and professional voice? Chapter 3. That night, I sat alone in my kitchen, staring at the iPad like it was a bomb waiting to go off. My son, Michael, came by to pick up his daughter, and I almost told him everything right then. But when I looked into his tired eyes, I froze. He loved Rebecca. He trusted her completely. If I showed him the files without a plan, he might hand the device back to her, and then it would all disappear. I forced a smile, kissed my granddaughter's head, and watched them leave, the secret burning in my chest. I didn't sleep. I made tea and sat in the quiet, remembering the years I spent fighting for scraps of respect in this family. Rebecca always had a way of making me feel small, like my words didn't matter. I thought maybe it was my imagination, that maybe I was being too sensitive. But now I knew better. She wanted me gone, not just from the house, but from history. I thought of my husband, buried just a mile away, and whispered into the dark. What do I do? The answer didn't come easy. I was old, but I wasn't weak. If Rebecca thought she could erase me quietly, she had underestimated me. The iPad was proof. But I had to be smart. I had to be quiet. And then, as if fate was listening, a name came into my mind. Someone who might just help me see the truth clearly before it was too late. But could I really trust them with this? Chapter 4. The next morning, I called an old friend, Martha. She wasn't just a friend. She had been a paralegal in Louisville for 30 years before she retired. If anyone knew how to read between the lines of legal documents, it was her. I invited her over for coffee, and when she saw the look on my face, she knew this wasn't just a social visit. I placed the iPad between us. "Martha," I whispered, "I need you to look at something." She scrolled, her eyes narrowing. After nearly an hour, she leaned back and shook her head. "Lorraine, this isn't just talk. These are drafts, agreements, time-stamped documents. Your daughter-in-law has been working with an attorney to cut you out completely. She's using your own son's power of attorney. Do you remember signing that form when Michael had surgery?" My blood ran cold. I had signed papers in good faith, thinking I was helping my son. But Rebecca had found a way to twist it, to use it as a weapon. I felt sick, gripping the edge of the table. "So, she can take everything?" I whispered. Martha nodded slowly. "Unless you act fast. But Lorraine, you can't go to her yet. She's too careful. If she catches wind, she'll bury this deeper than you can ever reach." I looked out the window at my quiet yard, the garden I planted with my husband's hands. Would I really lose it all to someone who had married into my family only to gut it from the inside? My chest ached, but in that pain was a spark. No, not yet. I wasn't done. But little did I know, Rebecca already suspected something. And her next move would shake me to the core. Chapter 5. 3 days later, a letter arrived in my mailbox. The envelope was crisp, addressed in bold type. When I opened it, my hands trembled. It was from a law office in Atlanta. The words were sharp and official. Notice of transfer proceedings. My home was already being processed quietly under my nose. I nearly collapsed in my kitchen, clutching the counter to stay upright. She wasn't waiting. She was already moving against me. I called Martha, in tears. "It's happening," I whispered. Martha's voice was steady. "Lorraine, listen to me. We're not going to let her win. But you need help bigger than me now. Someone who knows how to freeze this before she takes another step. I swallowed hard. The idea of lawyers, courts, public fights. It terrified me. But I realized Rebecca was counting on that fear. She thought I would crumble, hide, let her take everything. Not this time. Not with my granddaughter's innocent mistake giving me the evidence I never would have seen otherwise. I pressed the letter to my chest and closed my eyes. I'll fight, I whispered to myself. I don't care how long it takes. But what I didn't know was that Rebecca was already preparing her defense. And she wasn't just after my house. She wanted my dignity. Stay with me, because what came next turned my quiet Kentucky life into a battlefield. Chapter 6. The next morning, I sat with a notice letter spread out on my kitchen table. Every word on that page felt like a knife, cutting pieces of me away. But I didn't cry this time. Instead, I picked up the phone and called Martha. Who do I go to? I asked. She didn't hesitate. There's a man in Frankfurt, David Holloway. He's a retired attorney who consults on estate fraud. He doesn't take many cases, but if you show him what you found, he might help you. Driving to Frankfurt felt like carrying a weight on my chest. I kept replaying Rebecca's smile, the way she served pie at Thanksgiving, the way she hugged me for show. She was playing the long game, and she thought I was too frail to notice. I walked into Holloway's office, clutching the iPad like it was my lifeline. He listened quietly as I explained, then flipped through the files. Finally, he looked up at me with steel in his eyes. Mrs. Carter, you're sitting on a gold mine of evidence. But you have to be careful. If she realizes you've seen this, she'll try to flip the story. We need to file an emergency hold before anything moves forward. My hands trembled as I nodded. An emergency hold. A pause button on Rebecca's theft. Could I really do this? Holloway leaned forward. Lorraine, you've been underestimated your whole life. That's about to change. But just as a spark of hope lit inside me, I got a phone call that nearly sent me crashing back to despair. Chapter 7. It was Michael. His voice was tight. Mom, Rebecca just got a call from her attorney. She says you've been snooping into her work files. What's going on? My stomach dropped. She knew. Somehow she knew. I struggled for words. Michael, listen to me. This isn't just about work. She's trying to, but he cut me off. Mom, stop. Rebecca told me you're confused, maybe overwhelmed since Dad died. She says you're making up stories. His tone softened, like he was speaking to a child. Don't let paranoia ruin the family. I sat in silence, gripping the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. Paranoid. That was the word Rebecca wanted him to use. She was painting me as the frail, senile old woman whose words meant nothing. It was the perfect trap. If I spoke, I looked crazy. If I stayed silent, she stole everything. After the call, I cried into my hands. For years, I had been the backbone of this family. And now, my own son thought I was losing my mind. That night, I sat in the dark, rocking in my chair, wondering if I had the strength to keep fighting. But then I remembered something Holloway had said. Timestamp everything. Save every draft. Paper doesn't lie. And I realized I didn't have to convince Michael with words. I could let the evidence speak for me. Still, the question burned in my chest. How much damage could Rebecca do before I stopped her? Chapter 8. Holloway filed the emergency hold on my property the next day. It wasn't permanent, but it froze any transfer until a judge could review the case. When I held that stamped paper in my hand, I felt like I could breathe for the first time in weeks. Rebecca couldn't steal my home. At least not yet. But victories in battles like these are always short-lived. That evening, Rebecca herself showed up at my doorstep. She looked polished, perfect hair, sharp heels clicking against my porch. She didn't even ask to come in. She just pushed past me and stood in my living room. I know what you're trying to do, she said softly, her smile thin as glass. But let me make this clear. You will lose. No one will believe you. And when this is over, you'll wish you stayed quiet. Her words sliced me deeper than any lawyer's letter could. She wasn't pretending anymore. This was her true face. I wanted to scream, to throw her out, but instead I stood there trembling. She leaned in closer. Michael is mine. The grandkids are mine. And soon, your house will be mine too. Then she turned and left, her perfume lingering in the air like poison. I sank into my chair, clutching my chest. For the first time, I wondered if she might be right. Could I really win against someone this ruthless? But then I thought of my granddaughter, the innocent mistake that exposed everything. If not for her, I would never have known. And that was when I decided I wouldn't fight just for me. I'd fight for her future too. Chapter 9. The court date came faster than I expected. I walked into the courthouse in Lexington with Holloway at my side. My legs shook, but my heart was steady. Rebecca sat across the aisle, perfectly dressed, her lawyer whispering in her ear. Michael was beside her, not beside me. The sight nearly broke me. When the judge called my case, Holloway stood and presented the iPad files. He spoke calmly, pointing out timestamps, metadata, email drafts. The courtroom buzzed with whispers. Rebecca's lawyer objected, claiming the files were taken without permission. But the judge raised a hand. This material is admissible. Continue. My breath caught in my throat. For once, the truth was being heard. Rebecca's face hardened, her mask cracking for just a moment. She whispered angrily to her lawyer, her hand tightening around Michael's arm. He looked at her with confusion, doubt flickering in his eyes. It was a small win, but it was a win. The emergency hold was extended until a full trial could be scheduled. I walked out of the courthouse into the crisp Kentucky air, tears streaming down my face. I wasn't erased, not yet. But as I stood on those courthouse steps, a man approached me quietly. "Mrs. Carter," he asked, "there's something you don't know. Something Rebecca's been hiding even deeper." Chapter 10. The man's name was Alan, a clerk from Rebecca's law firm in Atlanta. His voice was low, cautious. "I've seen the files she didn't mean to leave on that iPad. She has more than just your estate in her plans. She's been funneling money from Michael's accounts too. He doesn't even know." My heart sank. This wasn't just about me. She was draining my son's life as well. Alan handed me a small flash drive. "I shouldn't be doing this," he whispered, "but I can't watch her destroy families anymore. Everything you need is on here: bank transfers, false signatures, hidden accounts." I clutched it like it was gold. That night, I plugged the flash drive into my old computer. Line after line of numbers, transfers, and signatures appeared. Rebecca wasn't just trying to erase me. She was setting Michael up for financial ruin, leaving him dependent on her forever. My hands shook as I printed each document, stacking them neatly in a folder. I looked at the pile of papers and thought, this is my weapon. Quiet, undeniable proof. Rebecca thought she could silence me with charm and legal tricks. But now, I had something she couldn't talk her way out of. Still, one thought haunted me. If she realized I had these papers, how far would she go to stop me? Stay with me, because what happened next almost cost me everything. Chapter 11. The days leading up to the full trial were heavy with silence. Michael stopped calling. When he did come by, his words felt rehearsed, like they weren't his at all, but hers. "Mom, Rebecca says you're trying to tear us apart."
"Why?"
"Don't you want me to be happy?" I wanted to grab him and shake him, to scream, "Open your eyes." But I bit my tongue. Instead, I pressed the folder of evidence closer to my chest. Rebecca was clever. She dressed her lies in lace, making them look like love. But Alan's flash drive had pulled the lace away. I saw her for who she really was, a predator feeding on the people who trusted her most. I stayed up late every night, organizing documents, highlighting signatures, practicing what I would say in court. Holloway warned me, "She'll try to twist this."
"Stay calm."
Let the paper speak. But calm was the hardest thing to hold on to. Because in my heart, I knew Rebecca wouldn't go down quietly. Chapter 12. Sure enough, the night before trial, a brick smashed through my front window. I jumped out of bed, glass scattering across the floor. My granddaughter screamed upstairs. On the brick was a note: "Drop the case or else." My blood ran cold. I knew it was her, Rebecca, or someone she had sent. Fear clawed at me, but rage burned hotter. This wasn't just about stealing my home anymore. This was about intimidation, control, and power. I called Holloway, voice trembling. He told me to report it, but deep down, I already knew what I had to do. I taped the note to my evidence folder. If she wanted to play dirty, I would show the judge just how far she was willing to go. I stood at the window that night, staring out at the dark street. My chest was tight, but I whispered to myself, "You are not the frail old woman she thinks you are. Tomorrow you fight." Chapter 13. The courtroom was colder this time, or maybe it was just me. Rebecca sat there calm as ever, like nothing could touch her. Michael avoided my eyes. When the judge entered, the room hushed, and the trial began. Rebecca's lawyer went first, painting her as the loving wife, the hard-working woman who only wanted to help her aging mother-in-law. They claimed I was paranoid, bitter, and resistant to letting go of control. The words stung because I saw Michael nodding. For a moment, doubt pricked me. What if the judge believed her? Then it was Holloway's turn. He stood tall, voice steady. He laid out the iPad evidence, then the flash drive files Alan had given me. Bank statements, transfers, fraudulent wills, the brick with the note. Each item landed like a hammer against Rebecca's mask. Finally, he handed the judge one last page. Rebecca's signed plan to sell my home within 3 months, dated before Michael even knew about it. The room went silent. Rebecca's face blanched, then twisted with fury. For the first time, her polished image cracked wide open. And Michael, my son, looked at her like he was seeing her for the very first time. Chapter 14. The judge's gavel came down hard. The court grants a permanent injunction against Mrs. Rebecca Carter regarding the estate of Lorraine Carter. Furthermore, this court is opening a criminal inquiry into fraudulent financial activity and potential intimidation. Rebecca gasped, her lawyer whispering frantically. Michael just sat there, stunned, as if the floor had dropped out from under him. My heart ached for him. He had loved her so deeply, and she had played him like a violin. As deputies approached Rebecca, she turned her head and hissed at me, her voice sharp as broken glass. "You'll regret this." But I didn't flinch. For once, I didn't feel small. I stood taller than I had in years, watching as the woman who tried to erase me was finally unmasked. Michael ran after me as I left the courthouse. "Mom,
I didn't know."
I swear I didn't know." His voice cracked. I placed my hand on his cheek and whispered, "I know, son. But now you do." And in that moment, the quiet justice I had prayed for began to bloom. Chapter 15. Weeks later, the house was quiet again. No court dates.
No threats.
Just me, my rocking chair, and the laughter of my granddaughter playing upstairs. I had won, but the victory felt bittersweet. Families don't come out of battles like this unscarred. Michael was broken, grieving the wife he thought he knew. But in that silence, I also found peace. I had proven that truth doesn't need to shout. It only needs to stand firm. Rebecca's schemes had crumbled because she underestimated me. She thought I was too old, too frail, too weak to fight back. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the Kentucky hills, I pulled out the iPad that had started it all. I ran my fingers over its screen, remembering the horrified phone call from the teacher, the trembling discovery of Rebecca's secrets. What began as a child's innocent mistake had become the weapon that saved my life. I looked out the window, smiling softly. My justice hadn't been loud or vengeful. It had been quiet, steady, and unshakable. And sometimes I thought that's the most powerful kind of justice there is.